Everyone, this is Mr. Jennings here with the last lecture of this week's videos. Today we're going to talk about pedigrees. Now, pedigrees are a way you can chart a trait's inheritance. This is how you can determine if a trait is sex-linked, if the trait is dominant, or a trait is autosomal recessive. And the way you do that is basically you track the family history of a genetic disorder. Pedigrees on themselves are pretty simple to read. They can be complicated, and because family history can be complicated, and the activity I'm assigning to you with this video is a little bit more complicated, and that's called the Blue People Kentucky, and I'll do a separate little video for that. I won't consider it a part of the lecture series. Alright, so let's get into it. Now, pedigrees are a chart that shows the inheritance of traits through several different generations. Here on the screen is a pedigree for albinism. Now, albinism is a trait where you lack skin pigment, and you have no skin pigment at all, no hair pigment, no eye pigment. It is a recessive disorder, and it is autosomal, and we'll talk about why we know that here in a moment. So when you look at a pedigree, you need to look at the symbols. So first off, we have the square. The square is going to represent the male, and circles represent females. Now, if I was to draw a line between them, in humans, that symbolizes marriage. In animals, that symbolizes a mating. If it's dashed lines in humans, it means a mating outside of marriage, like an affair or something. I guess whole British royal family type stuff. Now, if we draw a line underneath it, that means the person gave birth, pain, suffering, all that good stuff. Now, if they have a line going down and it gets to a crossbar, and each crossbar comes off, as you see here, that means they had 4 kids. Each of these represents a kid. They had 2 boys, and 2 girls. Now, if you see shading, this is really quick. For shading purposes, you'll see different things here. So, for instance, if it's a fully colored box or fully colored circle, that means they are affected. Now, that means the individual could be AA or AA. If it's half shaded, that could be heterozygous. Now, if it is a recessive disorder, it is going to be heterozygous and may not always see the shading. We'll talk more about that in the actual application. And if it's a dominant disorder, sometimes the dominant individual will be, the heterozygous can also be fully expressed. It'll be fully shaded. But typically, fully shaded means they display the genetic disorder or the genetic trait. Half shaded means they carry the trait, which usually means heterozygous. So this here is an example of albinism, which is a recessive disorder. The individual, the only way they can express it is the only way they'll have full-blown albinism is if they're homozygous recessive, and the only way that can happen is if their kids have albinism. The only way that works is if the mother in this situation is also a carrier, so they have to be heterozygous. And we can see the genotypes of the kids. So that one's messed up here. I just found it. That one should be a little a. Deafness can be a dominant disorder. Basically, you don't know if the mother or father, in this case, the mother here, could be heterozygous or homozygous for the trait. But based on the offspring, you can kind of predict, since all of them seems to have be heterozygotes, because the fact that in this case, the father is homozygous recessive. Because the father is homozygous recessive, all the kids have at least one little a. But it means if they're deaf, if they display the deafness phenotype, that means the parent had to be AA, dominant, homozygous dominant. Color blindness. This is an example of a sex-linked. Now, sex-linked traits are predominantly going to affect males. However, in this situation we see up here, the mother and the father, the mother is a carrier. So in sex-linked, we use different symbology. X and Y, obviously, to show the sex chromosomes. But you'll see a lowercase c or a capital C on the X, letting you know, 1, it's sex-linked, and 2, if it's dominant recessive. Since this one's got the recessive trait and he's colorblindness, you know it's sex-linked recessive, because the father is colorblind and he has only recessive alleles. The mother is heterozygous for the trait, so she has the dominant allele and a recessive allele. The children, one of the boys is going to be born with the recessive allele, meaning he will display color blindness. The daughter, heterozygous. This other son, heterozygous as well, because only when it comes to men, only the mother provides the X chromosome. Because the father is the only one that can provide the Y. So all the X chromosomes for boys comes from the mother. And in females, it can come from both mother and father. And in this situation, we can have a sex-linked recessive in a female, which is rare because the mother is a carrier of the trait and the father is full-blown phenotype. And this is the family tree. This is from another teacher here, but you can see that. All right, that concludes. So, pedigrees, reading them are pretty easy. Making them, not so much. The next little video we're going to see here in a little bit is going to be on the Blue People of Kentucky, and I will work out a little bit of a pedigree for you to kind of show you how to work those. Reading these are not that complicated. Making them is a lot worse because you're looking at family history. And family history sometimes can be very convoluted and messy because you're reliant on unreliable, storytellers. That concludes this little week's of worth of lecture. When we come back next week, we will be doing evolution and biotechnology. Take care. Be well. See you real soon.